Hi everyone, it's Lucy from My Crazy Craft Life, and I'm here today with the design team post for Dies R Us. So I'm going to be making this fun cross stitch card, and I used a few different dies. I used a cross stitch grid die in a rectangle shape. I used some embroidery hoops dies, and I used a hello die. And I'll link some dies below that you can pick up over at Dies R Us. For the grid, I cut it out with some 110-pound Nina Solar white cardstock. I like to use the heavier cardstock because when you're cross-stitching on it, you are, holding it a lot and moving it a lot, and it's a sturdier cardstock. The embroidery hoops I cut out of 65-pound craft cardstock, and I wanted it a little bit thicker, so I just cut out 2 of them and glued them together. Now I have the 3 hoops here, and I'll be honest with you, I've only ever used the big one, but I never took them apart, and I just cut them out when I do use them. You can pick up patterns from the internet. There's lots of free patterns on there. You just have to make sure that it's not for actual cross stitch and it would actually fit, with the space that you have. They have different shaped ones. Circles for the grids, circles and hearts and all different shapes. But this one is the rectangle. So whatever you're going to do, you need to make sure it's going to fit on there. But specifically for these types of grids, My Favorite Things has a bunch of them on their website that you can download. And for this particular pattern, that is where I got it from, was from My Favorite Things. Now I'm going to show you, I do this very simply. I either do straight lines, diagonal lines, or X's. For this particular one, I was using X's. Now you count these off just the exact same way you would do a cross stitch pattern. So if there are 8 colored boxes, you're going to do 8 stitches across 4 little holes, if that makes sense. So each little hole where it's going to kind of create a box is going to be 1 stitch for these X's, and that's what I do with this. And a lot of times when I'm doing just X's all the way across, I'll just go in a diagonal line all the way across in the same direction and then do the opposite direction on the way back. It makes it pretty simple. And the 18 gauge needles fit perfectly through this grid die cut so that you can do that way. Now my favorite thread to use is JB Coats, and it's craft thread, and this thread does not come apart, so there's not like 10 separate little strings that you have to separate. This is just one string. It does not separate. That's my favorite. This has been harder for me to find lately, and another one that I found was if you go to the craft stores, Joann's or AC Moore's or Hobby Lobbies, and you look for friendship bracelet kits that they have, that kids can make, a lot of times they have this single strand craft thread in those, and that's where I got some of mine from as well. But you can see it can go pretty quickly. You don't have to worry about having everything kind of perfect. You're going to cut off all of the ends. Now what I do is, if you see there, I was just kind of picking up that end. I'll just pick it up and go over it in the back a few times to try to kind of lock it in there, because this will get glued down to a card base or a panel, and so you don't really have to worry about it coming out, but you do want to give it a little bit of space and just to have that little bit of extra security. So that's why I just kind of wrap it up when I'm doing a couple stitches towards the end. And then when you want to finish it, you're just going to put it through a couple of the stitches and then pull it through the hoop that you make after you put it through a couple of the stitches in the back. And that's it. And then you're just going to cut off the ends. Now this one I did not cut off the ends. Normally I cut off the ends kind of more as I go, but I kind of just wanted you to see. I just snip them fairly close to the grid, kind of where it ends, wherever I kind of stuck it, and it got stuck in some other, stitches and whatnot. And I just kind of trim all of that off. But it's still kind of bulky, so what I normally do for these is I pop them up somehow. Whether I pop them up with foam squares if it's the whole panel, or like this particular one I'm going to use fun foam, and I'm going to pop that up. And I cut this out so that it had a border. It ended up having a border that was 1/4 of an inch all the way around. Um, I decided I wanted it a little bit smaller because I wanted the pattern paper to show through when I decided on which one I was using. And I end up using a purple card base. It's a darker purple, not this one that you see here right now. I was kind of fiddling around with it for a while. But the darker purple kind of, I think, goes well with the flowers that are in this. And there I was just kind of measuring it, making sure it was 1/4 of an inch all the way around. Now, since I was going to use the fun foam, I decided to use the green instead of just using a white. And you'll see me stick it on there. This has adhesive on it. This particular fun foam has adhesive on the back of it. So I just used the adhesive side to stick it to the embroidered card base. Or not the card base, but the embroidered area. And then I decided I didn't like the green in that color. I thought it was going to be a little more muted, but it stood out pretty good. So then I ended up pulling it up, and I end up putting that piece of purple vellum that I have there on there. And I thought you'd be able to see it a little better because the green really did stand out, but then you really couldn't, and I just ended up leaving it because I just didn't know what else I wanted to do, but I think that gave it a good tone underneath and it looked fine. So then I ended up just using a strip on there. So I'm going to adhere that to there, and now this time I'm going to add some glue since I had pulled that up and I didn't want it, it lost some of its stickiness, and I'm just going to pop that on there. And then I'm going to pop the card base on after I cut it down to size. Now I am using this to have a slight border around it. So I ended up, this is an A2 size card, so it's 5.5 by 4.25, and I cut that piece down to 5.25 by 4 inches. And then I am going to just use that piece of purple vellum, and I put it towards the top, the glue, so that you couldn't really see it, because I'm going to end up having that other panel with the cross stitch on top of it anyway, so you won't really see that. And then there's where I grabbed the darker purple card. So I'm just going to adhere that on there. Now this is just pattern paper. It's pretty thin and it was kind of picking up on me. But I'm going to pop that down there. I'm going to stick some glue on the back of that fun foam and then get that on there. And then I cut out the hello from a few different, well, 2 different greens, kind of an olive green that really matches those leaves well, and then a brighter green. And I'm just using that brighter green on the bottom. I'm going to end up gluing 4 of them together, and I wanted to give this some more bulk because it's kind of a bulky card because of the fun foam and the embroidery. I wanted the hello to be a little bulky and to give it some substance on it. And then I end up having it hanging off, so it really needed that, to make it a little more solid. And then I'm just going to pop that embroidery hoop on it. And that will be pretty much it for this card. I love doing the cross stitch. It is kind of timely, so I don't do them often because it does take quite a while to obviously do that. But sometimes I like to sit and watch TV and do the cross stitch while I'm watching TV. I don't usually have my markers or coloring things up when I'm watching TV, and this cross stitch is kind of nice and it's compact and I can carry it around easily, where when I have my markers, I have a big bin of markers or a big book of colored pencils. So this is it for this card. I hope you're enjoying these videos, and make sure you hit subscribe at the bottom and go check out Dies R Us for lots of different types of dies, all different types. And I will, like I said, link some dies down here so that you can make one of these cards. So again, I hope you're enjoying this. I hope everybody is taking care and staying healthy. And I will see you next time.